Y'all know what it is.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to Eggs. On this week's show, we have special guest, Regenerative Business Coach and founder of the Garden Continuum, Monique Allen. Over the last 3 decades, Monique has watched as the growing commercialization and commoditization of the landscaping industry has undermined the benefits of its increased accessibility to those seeking to improve their land and their mental states. With this in mind, she founded the Life-Scape method. As a lifelong gardener, business developer, and educator, Monique has dedicated her career to creating an alternative approach and sharing actionable information on how to spread a positive message about improving our land, our lives, and our professional satisfaction through lifescaping and compassionate business building. Monique joins us today to discuss a sustainable lifescaping practice for commercial and residential applications, how to develop a unique brand and win in overly commoditized industries, how to propagate a proper company culture, how to lead with compassion, and so much more. Please join us in welcoming to the show, Monique Allen. Hey, Monique, how are you?
I'm doing great. Gosh, that was read so perfectly. Thank you. Wow.
Yeah, if you knew how many takes it took, I don't know if you'd think that. That's right.
Maybe you could just send me that recording.
Well, can I tell you how hard it is to say regenerative? I mean, regenerative is like the word that I stuck on forever.
I love that.
I love it. That's great.
Anybody that reads scripts or any of that stuff, I'm dying. And so, Mike will tell you too, anytime I write, these things are always needlessly complicated and hard to read. And so I always make sure to add some, verbosity and make it a little bit harder to understand. So
there you go.
I'm a pro at that. And so,
well, I used to read these, and then he kept typing them like that. And I said, "It's all your job now."
Yeah, that's it. I'm out.
Well, anyway, let's go ahead and get right into it then. So, well, thanks for doing the show, Monique. We're glad to have you here. Let's talk a little bit about your background and just sort of who you are and what we're doing here.
Yeah, thanks. You did such a great job in the introduction. It kind of covered it all. But, today, my job is that I garden people. As strange as that might sound, I take really, really good care of people through the work that I do as a landscape professional. So I build landscapes, design, build, and maintain landscapes for homes and for commercial sites. And our landscapes, as you said, are lifescapes. They really are about how to transform the personal experience when you're at work, when you're at home, so that you're connecting with nature. And then I turn all that energy inside and I cultivate the lives and the experiences of my employees. And then I also do that as a regenerative business coach. So glad I said that word, right?
See, I don't know what my problem.
And just sort of taking that whole idea of regenerative agriculture, which is about taking areas of land that may be damaged or in distress and helping them to use the natural wisdom of nature to regenerate health, wellness, and vitality. And what I learned when I was developing the Lifescape method is that human beings can do that for themselves. They just need the environment for it to be right. So we can do that in land, we can do that in businesses, we can do that in families and relationships, in corporate cultures. And so that's what I spend my time doing.
That's a really neat approach. We didn't discuss this in advance, but I've been doing a 4-year-long landscaping project myself. And you can go and see pictures of it at mountainviewlawn.com. But I kind of picked up how, lifescaping comes into hand with landscaping. And I pretty much do it just to stay in shape. And then when COVID hit, my event calendar kind of went from really busy to nothing. And so I actually took landscaping and started a business and did it for a summer just to get through COVID. So I can relate.
That is awesome. That is, well, I got to send you a copy of my book then, because you'll get a kick out of it. I mean, I've been developing my property for 25 years. And so it's amazing. And I'm sure you felt this is if you take anything, whether it's a landscape or a business, right? And you start year one and you behave a certain way, you have certain thoughts, ideas, visions, you put them into play. You got to be able to come back in year 2 and go good, bad, indifferent, change, keep, and think about it. And then year 3, you do it again. Year 4, you do it again. And interestingly, I've seen this in the landscape process and I've seen this in the business process, that people sometimes get stuck in the idea that they had, and they struggle to iterate. And the best possible thing we can do is allow it to be an iterative process. So each year you sort of get into this practice of iterating it so that it just sort of builds on itself and gets better and better and better. There's no way you could have known this year what you know now 4 years ago.
Oh, exactly. Like when I started the project initially, we had a big tree that was growing next to the house, and it was causing, like, the roots were getting too close to the foundation. It was causing some problems.
Yeah.
So we took that tree out, and now we had this big hole in the yard that needed a rock wall. And the rock wall turned into a flagstone patio, turned into putting sod down. And then I realized, oh, we need a sprinkler system. So I ruined the sod that I put down. And now this year I'm leveling because you got little trench holes. And so I'm bringing in topsoil, and I'm doing, it's a never ending project, but I love it because it's my way of staying in shape. It doesn't look like I'm in shape. It's spring. Wait till the end of summer and I'll get back there. But yeah, it's been amazing, and I learned a bunch. And like you said, it is iterative. Yeah. As you go, it just kind of like, oh, this could be done. This could be done. Put on another project next year, and it always is evolving. So
yeah, and I think we can be a lot more kind to ourselves when it comes to like something like a landscape. Let's say, like you probably would never put sod down before considering irrigation, right? You just learn it. You're done. You've learned that. It's funny in business how entrepreneurs can be a little hard on themselves. It's like I should have known, or there's a feeling of shame that something didn't go right, or that there was a quote unquote failure, like this incredible fear of failure. John Maxwell always talks about like failing forward and taking those failures and saying, oh, okay, well, I can build on that. And any failure is an opportunity to learn and to take a really bold step forward. So I love how the work I've done actually landscaping and working with nature has created this foundational understanding for how to work on business. So when I wrote the book, it was all about landscaping. It was really just looking at the landscape process from that first dream to like the final blade of grass. And it was when I was working with it that I started to realize, I'm like, dude, I'm doing this in my business too. I'm doing the exact same thing. So now you bring a little bit of psychology into it. You bring a little bit of business strategy into it. And it just, the regenerative business community just built out of that.
Yeah, no, I love that. And in fact, I just kind of want to restate the obvious, I guess, but, building off your experience and then also talking or, building off sort of Mike's experience and having lived through it with him, although he did all the physical labor. But I mean, I think the point you're making is exactly right. Really it's the way that we approach anything from an art project to a design job to, a physical landscape, building a landscape. All the steps that you do, whether you're creating a landscape or whether you're building a company, are sort of those things, those steps, right? These little iterative steps. We don't just step in one day and have a Nike. Rather, you start building a shoe, and then you build, a brand, and then you build a whatever, there's a process, right?
Right.
And I also think that there's something to not necessarily knowing everything. There's that old saying, to start with the end in mind, right? And we do a lot of planning, and you guys, especially in the landscaping business, do a lot of pre-planning before you actually, start tearing things up. But, taking that time and actually mapping out the process so that you know where you're going to end up, I think is critical too. And that's part of this iteration step, is that even once you've achieved, the quote unquote end, there's still more to do, right? The process will continue iterating. You'll have a tree die. You'll have some bum grass, or, your dogs will ruin it or whatever. And you got to go in and you got to fix some things. Yeah. Right. And so it's like, it's really never truly done. You might build the foundation, but at some point you've got to kind of just keep the business moving. So I think it's a really fun metaphor, this idea of landscaping as a business.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. And, I think about like just the whole game of hiring, of having employees, and just the difference of having a company that has no employees to just like a small handful of employees to having layers of employees where like you as the owner no longer have direct access on a daily basis. And I just remember that growth process and thinking, oh, okay, I've seen it all. Like now I know now. And then some event or something coming through the door and going, God, I didn't see that come. Like, I don't even know how I could have planned for that or read a book or taken a class. And then you think, okay, now I've seen it all. And then something else comes through, like, okay, now I've definitely seen it all. And it's just sort of this acceptance that I'm in my 37th year as a landscape professional, my 32nd year, I think, as an employer. And so I'm at the point now where I'm like, I'm ready. Bring it on, which is so different than I've seen it all. It's like, I know there can be something different. And there's, I think, kind of a readiness. I think if you think about like a boxer in a ring, they are trained to see it coming. And the key is, can you be nimble? It's never, can I get it so right that nothing will come, that nothing will unseat me, knock me off my center or whatever? Or is it, I'm going to be ready. I'm going to learn how to be nimble, how to have a good center of gravity, how to be able to dance around and then see it when it comes. And I think that's just like a mindset shift where you just, it's not like you're waiting for the second shoe to drop. Instead, you're just very clear and curious that the world of business is dynamic and there are going to be discomforts, and your job is to be able to navigate that discomfort.
Love that. Can we go back to like year 5 when you first took on employees and talk about how, talk about how that changed things? Because for me, year 1, it was like get my feet wet, figure stuff out. And that's when I realized that I enjoy doing it for myself, but I don't enjoy doing it for other people. And I think if I had started at a younger age and would have gone into landscaping as a business instead of as a hobby and then forced into business, I think that year 5, when you start bringing on the foreman and a few other laborers and get that workload off yourself where you can focus on the business, that kind of changes the whole dynamic of doing the work yourself. So maybe can you start just talk about that first little period going from doing everything yourself to having a team and having the ability to, offload some of that work to other people.
Yeah.
I just want to say too, actually, before you get started,
yes,
I don't want to muddy the waters too much, but I do want to make the point for people who don't know your background that you began life, or you, at least a significant part of your life was as a freelance person. Yep. So as an individual, sort of more like, and actually that's what I do. Right. And so there is a significant mindset shift from self-employed freelancer to business owner with employees. And so I just wanted to point that out for anybody who might be listening, who is a self-employed freelance type person, that, how this advice happens or how that transition happens. So anyway, sorry to interrupt. I just thought people should have that context.
Yeah, no, it's a great segue. And actually in my book, I do kind of talk about like that origin story. So I can do that really quickly. I'll just share, because I do think it is an important foundation for the transition. I was introduced to the landscape industry when I was 18, and I just around my 19th birthday, I made the leap. I decided that this is what I wanted to do, at least in the near term. I had no clue I would do it for this long. It just felt right at that moment. And so I just literally bopped around initially in that first season, working for different people. There was a guy in college who's just like, hey, you're strong. Why don't you come out and mulch with us? I'm like, what did you just ask me to do? And I grew up a dancer. And at this point I was in college and I was into bodybuilding. So I liked being physical. It just keeps my mind good if I'm doing physical work. And I did this job and I just completely fell in love with it. I have a bit of a trauma story in my background. And so one thing we know really, really clearly right now is that work in nature helps to regulate the mind. It just does that. And so it worked for me. I ended up finding a mentor, and again, just kind of dumb luck, following the threads. And I worked with this mentor for about 2 years, and she was amazing. She taught me a ton. I was just really hungry. So I kept pushing her to do more, and she didn't really want to, which is fine. I'm still friends with her today. And so I started to go off and take my own jobs because I was just more ambitious and I was a good amount younger than her. And from there, what started to happen was that I just physically needed help. Like I couldn't get the big U stumps out from the front of the property. I could chainsaw them down, but no matter how I dug. So I'd tell my brother, who's like really into like building these monster trucks. I'm like, can you bring the truck and can we like wrap a chain and can we pull? So now I've got my brother. Then I got my brother's friends. Then I meet a contractor and he's awesome. And I realized that if I really want to pull something off, maybe I can hire him and his whole company and his fleet of equipment. So now I'm like collaborating and partnering with companies and having them help me get my ideas happening. Then I'm realizing I want even more help. So this is back in the day. So you got to remember, this is in the early 90s now, maybe late 80s. And I met this Guatemalan man who was awesome, Humberto. He worked with me for a while. And Humberto would work with me and just do anything I needed. He called me Miss Monique. If I picked up a shovel, he came running at me. No, Monique, I do. You know, he was such a love. And I would tell Humberto that I needed help. And we'd go into Watertown Center. I'd go in my pickup truck and 4 guys would jump in the back of the truck and I would have help. So this is something that's not going to happen now. But again, I grew up in the industry in a really different time. And in 1992, I hired my first W-2 employee. So I hired a woman who wanted to garden and I gave her basically part-time work. She worked 3 days a week for me. And I actually just did the whole W-2 thing. I was nervous, you know, it was definitely kind of scary to figure it out. But I have to tell you that doing that immediately shifted my mindset because now it wasn't just about getting the job. It was about providing for another human being. And I realized that my job now became 2 jobs. One job was to deliver and fulfill for the client. And the second job was to provide and create predictable income for this employee. And so if it rained, I now had to think it wasn't just me not working. It was now her not working. And I actually had to have a conversation about how this was going to affect her. Between, I would say, 1 and 6 employees, it's very easy to have direct contact and direct communication with your employees. When you move out of 6, something starts to shift because you start creating this other layer. And I usually tell people that what you need at that point, if you don't have one already, I actually tell new employees to build new owners to build organizational charts before they even hire. But most of the people that I get have already hired and they're somewhere between 4 and 6 and they're starting to feel the pain. So that's the point where you create the organizational chart. And it's really about creating the best possible ambassadors for your brand and what you're doing and for your fulfillment strategy. And then having those ambassadors then help you manage that next tier of worker. And as an owner, what I generally tell people is, if you're going to do that, if you're going to get outside the 6, you're not going to be an owner operator anymore. You've got to move out of job mentality. I mean, you should move out of job mentality as soon as possible. But in those early years, when we are freelancing, we're actually creating a job for ourselves. When we move into employing, we're now creating a business and we're creating jobs for other people. And so making that mindset shift is huge. And it's actually central to my coaching, is to help people understand. I don't teach people how to do their job. I teach them how to navigate and understand working with other humans so that they can do more, fulfill more, make more, earn more, and just have more impact in their business.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. That's super good advice. And I think it's very useful. That last little thing that you said, the separation or the difference between sort of, I guess, your traditional freelancer and somebody who's building a business is exactly that. It's that, you know, as a freelancer, you're creating a job for yourself, you're creating work. But as a business owner, all of a sudden it's a different game. And I think for a lot of freelancers, and I come to it from a little bit different angle. Like myself, and then a lot of people I work with are freelance art people, but it's the same thing, right? Everybody falls into the same trap where basically they've built themselves a job, and maybe they're very successful at it and it becomes a career or whatever. But then when it comes time to scale, they find out that they don't have the skills necessary to grow. Right. And so because they don't know anything other than just creating a job.
Yeah. And to be clear, freelancing is awesome. I mean, I loved my when I was freelancing because I had an enormous amount of freedom. So that is as long as it is a distinct decision to freelance and to create a job for yourself where you can make money and leverage that for yourself, hey, have a blast at it. Just know that that's what you're doing. And then when you decide you want to leverage it, all those connections and all that ability to make money, that you've got to make the mindset shift, or else what happens is you actually get weighed down. You really start to get, it's almost like that whole Gulliver thing. You just weighed down by this weight of other humans and trying to do the work. And it just never works out very well. It ends up being pretty painful for the owner.
Yeah. I like how you also mentioned that once you took on that first W-2 employee, your mindset just shifted. And that to me actually kind of, reminds me of like Ryan, when you first became a dad, it's like now you're providing for more than one person and they're relying on you. And so that changes everything. I don't have any kids, so I can still be lazy and slough off a little bit, but
I don't know, that dog back there.
But I mean, I could totally see how that would change everything, because they're relying on you as well. So
yeah, it's fundamental. It's like really in the core. I mean, I've got kids, and so that you just your whole outlook becomes a little bit different. And it's going to become different whether you plan for it or not. Like it's going to happen, right? If you have kids, I mean, it happens if you have a dog, right? Now all of a sudden you can't stay out all night. You actually got to let the poor guy out, right? So it'll change no matter what. I think the difference is with entrepreneurs, especially emerging entrepreneurs that have a vision and a drive to do something. If you go at it ahead of time, knowing that you're going to make a shift, boy, it's way smoother.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, and that's the thing, right? I mean, there's people like, so to use Mike's analogy, like with my kids, for me, I was anti-kid. I didn't want a kid, no kid. And then we found out we were pregnant. And it's like, okay, well, I guess we're having a kid. And it wasn't a matter of coming to terms with it or whatever. Just suddenly it was, right? That was the thing. And I think it's kind of what you're saying, like with this W-2 employee, all of a sudden, well, now you just are responsible. That's it. Like there's no discussion. You can't push back on it. Nothing. Just now you are. And so I think that mindset shift, yes, you can kind of prepare, right? You could sort of, maybe you're really into kids and you're just dying to have kids and that's what you're living for, is to eventually have a kid. But I would still make the argument that you don't really know what it's like until you've got a kid. Oh, and so, so even if you really wanted one and sort of prepared mentally, I still think it will be different for you, or you'll discover something new about yourself, and it sounds like, I don't know, maybe hokey or a little whatever, but I had no idea that I could love something as much as those kids. Like, whatever relationship I had with my wife or have with my wife, like it's a different thing, and I couldn't have understood it. I wouldn't have understood it. And, it wouldn't have made any sense until there was the kid.
Yeah. There's a huge leap of faith there, right? I mean, there's sort of, again, kind of leading with curiosity, that sort of openness, like, okay, we're having a kid. Let's see what, and this is kind of the thing, again, going back to this idea that entrepreneurs can be really hard on themselves. It's like, we can't go into this knowing what it's going to feel like. We can't go into it with such a plan of perfection that we're going to get it right out of the gate. We've got to be able to be nimble and kind of roll with some of the punches, because the punches are coming.
Yeah. That's for real.
That's real.
I think that's right. I wanted to talk maybe a little greater depth about something that we led with and then sort of just jumped off of, but is this concept of lifescaping. So I think we can all put together, sort of something in our head, what we think it means, but I wondered if you just dig into it a little bit about, what is lifescaping as you see it and as you've defined it, and then, how does that relate to everything else we're doing?
Yeah. Thank you for asking that. I started understanding when the industry changed a lot. from when I began. And there began to be a whole lot more awareness around health and well-being of the planet. And I was trying really hard to embrace what felt like, quote unquote, the right thing to do for the planet. Like, maybe don't use chemicals anymore, maybe be organic, maybe use native plants. And there was so much coming at us and a lot of shoulds, like you shouldn't use chemicals and you should always use natives and you should, and you should always soil test. But there was no real, nothing that pulled it together. And I'm a synthesizer by nature. I love information. I love data, and I kind of go in all different areas and I kind of pull it in and synthesize it and make something whole. And what I was seeing was that as landscaping was becoming more and more commoditized. So Martha Stewart did a great job making gardening popular. Awesome job. Whenever something gets popular, it gets picked up in the media, it gets picked up in products, and it can start spinning as a commodity. When things spin as a commodity, everything is about the product. I have this problem, what product should I use? I have this desire, what product can I buy? And then you have HDTV coming on top of it, also super awesome because it gives us like Pinterest, on steroids, so we can see what's possible. But now we're hearing, oh, you can remake your yard in a half an hour or in a half a weekend or, whatever. And you can buy whatever plants you want, just stick them in the ground. And it was just fast. And so much that what I started seeing were two things. I wasn't seeing landscapes anymore. I was seeing deadscapes and featurescapes. And featurescapes are when, I want a hot tub and I want a pool and I want a patio and I want a kitchen and I want a pergola and it's like, I want. And people who've got the means, they keep piling these things. And then you have this backyard that's full of all this stuff. And I don't know whether I'm going to take a swim or grill a hot dog or prune a rose. Like, I don't know what I'm doing out there. There's so much to do. So that was one. And then the other that I was seeing, especially in the commercial market, was so much money being thrown around and planting things. And then nobody was really taking care of it. Nobody knew how to take care of it. Things were getting damaged by snowplows, damaged by salt, damaged by bad pruning. And you just saw this lifeless pain. So it was this deadscape and featurescape. And I was trying to figure out in my own head, like, well, what am I looking for? And I realized that I wanted a lifescape. I wanted something that was thriving and living and beautiful and attractive, like in the sense that it attracted me into it. And so I realized that a lifescape is different from a landscape. Landscapes aren't bad, but a landscape is something that you look at. It's something that's beautiful and attractive kind of out here. But a lifescape is something that draws you in, something that you want to get in there. You want to feel it, be there. If you're having a really, really bad day, you want to go and sit on that bench near that really cool water feature with those pretty flowers, because over there, I can collect my thoughts, right? The vibration is different. So when I realized that a lifescape was something that you lived in, that it tapped into the vibrational centering potential of a human being, again, getting back to psychological safety and regulating, I thought, well, how do I simplify this? Because how am I ever going to teach this to like my employees? So I decided that lifescapes have there's three tenets of lifescaping. They have to be organized, they have to be healthy, and they have to have wow factor. So organization is all the design and planning. And it really is because our brains are very tired, and the more organized it is, the less we have to think. We just navigate intuitively. Health is because even if we don't know the difference between a healthy plant and an unhealthy plant, our vibration does. And again, not to be woo-woo, but it does. So our vibration knows when we're around a healthy human, a healthy animal, or a healthy environment. We also know when we're in a sick environment or around sick people. And so it's got to have health because that vibration is super important. And then the third thing is bling. It's the wow, because human beings love pretty. Your pretty and my pretty might be different, but we all love pretty and we're all attracted to beauty. And so to make sure that we work the beauty into it is critical. Now, the last thing is that it goes in order. We've got to be organized. Then we manage and plan and develop for health. And then we think about the wow. Most of what the commoditized industry does is leads with the wow. Plant this purple flower. It's really pretty. Get roses. They're really awesome. Buy this fire pit. It's so much fun. But it's not organized, and it's not feeding into the health. You see what I mean? So I wrote the whole book kind of in that order. This is how you should think about it, from that initial dream all the way to the last blade of grass. And that is Lifescaping.
I love that you start with organization, because that's so fundamental in everything that you do, whether it's a dirty or cluttered house. That kind of puts you in that unorganized mindset. That kind of, having a clean place that you live in, for me, if I have my music library is so organized that I can type in a genre, a decade, and I get a list of 100 songs that, if I'm doing, all of a sudden there's a group of Latinos in front of me and I'm doing Latin music that I wasn't expecting, that I have 100 Latin songs there. Yeah. But then, as like last year when I was doing landscaping, all the things you have to have organized to do a sprinkler system install for someone, you have to get permits, you have to get all the parts, you got to know where all you're tying into your water source. There's so much involved in just doing a project that you have to plan out in advance, so that it all comes it comes through and you don't have any problems. Right. That organization is key, and that starts everything off, and then you can go from there. And I love that you started with that. So
awesome. Yeah. I was just thinking about the fact that, like, you wouldn't go into a nightclub without a plan.
Yeah.
It's like you have your plan, you have your backup plan, you have your plan, and you have your organization. And then honestly, like, what's the health in that, right? The health is you've got some good dancing going on. Well, because that's it.
It actually is. It's the other way around for me.
Oh, what is it?
I don't go into a nightclub with a plan, because if I go into a nightclub with a plan, I'm planning for failure, because I'm not playing for me. I'm playing for the people in front of me.
So the plan is your library.
The plan is my organized library.
I get it.
So that way I can look at who's in front of me, look at the demographic. Oh, they're 21. I need new hip hop.
Yeah. I would make the argument anyway that the fact that you have all those libraries in place, though, is your plan, right? That's your organization. Even if you don't know what you're playing that night, like,
that quote, the separation is in the preparation. Yeah. That's what the music library is.
Nice.
You're set up in advance for any situation.
Yeah.
So, love that.
Yeah, I love that too. No, that's really cool. Well, and I think that, it's important to think about this organizational step. And I wanted to ask you, in your business coaching practice, and maybe, this will be me revealing a little about me, and maybe it's not indicative of everybody, but like, I tend to be the guy who thinks of the idea and then just goes right to it, because this is my skill set. I go right to developing the website and building the brand and all these things, right? Like I jump all the way in, but I'm almost jumping to step 3, kind of like what you were describing with people going out and just buying the pretty plant or whatever. Right. And I know sometimes, like, at least in landscaping, or in my experience with landscape, a lot of it's budget driven. Well, I only have $500. I can't build the giant landscape, but I can buy, $500 worth of flowers, so it sort of makes me skip the other 2 steps out of in that case, a necessity of money. But for, myself as a quote unquote entrepreneur, even though I'm definitely more a freelancer than a business leader, I find that I tend to skip all those organizational steps and jump right to the end. So when you get somebody who's like me, who probably does this, and I imagine, especially when you're dealing with idealistic people, this probably happens with some regularity. Yep. How do you, talk them backwards or get them to sort of reset? Because, like, I know, again, in my own experience, and especially as late into my career as I am, I'm struggling even now presently, trying to figure out how to sort of fix some stuff, because, like, I've been doing things the way I do them for so many years. So it's like, how do I reset, or how do you make that mental shift back to, getting back in order? Because I don't think it's too late. It's just how do you do it?
Yeah. So it's simple, but it's not easy. And what I call it is following the thread of pain and discomfort. So it's ouch. And you actually have to pull on that thread a little bit, which is kind of like pulling on the thorn in the paw, right? You've got to pull on it to actually get it out. And the difficulty is we don't know where the thorn is. And so what I do is whenever I'm starting coaching with somebody, because my focus is on business organization and team building. So huge, I'm working on how the business is organized and how we are working with teams. And teams don't always have to be employees. Sometimes it's freelance partners and collaborators. Sometimes it's partner contractors. So it's just how we're getting things done and who is working with us to get things done. So those are the two things, the organizations and the teams. And so what I do is in my first call is I'm doing a forensic call and I'm getting the story and trying to understand, okay, where's the pain? Where's the pain? So if I cycle back for a second, I would say that the way you do it is not necessarily wrong. It's actually how most entrepreneurs start, because we usually start following passion. And the thing is, passion is phenomenal for starting a business. It's kind of like how we start marriages, and it's really how kids start. So passion is awesome. But if we really look at what passion is, passion, when you go sort of into the root of that word, it's about a commitment to follow what we love, even through suffering. So we think of passion, it's like, I have this great idea and it's all really good and whatever. The key is, would you walk through the fire for that? And if you would, if we're talking about a landscape and it's budget driven, then you're going to spend $500 instead of in a bunch of flowers. You're going to buy that one tree, the one tree that 10 years from now, to make this vision work, is going to be the big tree, right? So in your business, you are so passionate about the brand. You get the brand and you're like, I'm getting that URL. I'm getting that website, right? I'm going to start putting a stake in the ground. So all of that is really good. And there's a lot of momentum, and you don't want to quell that momentum by needing perfection. Instead, when you get to that point where you start to hit where the pain is, you note where that pain is, and then you ask yourself what that pain is related to. That pain may be related to a mindset shift that you need to make because you think you're letting go, but you're not. You got this hand open and this hand got a chokehold on something. So we figure out how to pry your fingers off what you're choke holding over here. The other might be that you've got a certain idea about how things should be, but the truth is that the market's changed and now your business is evolving. And so you need to pivot and just look in a different direction. So it really starts with that forensics, and it starts with just tugging on the hurt points. And we can actually do that for ourselves in the beginning. Keep a journal, write it down. Bad day, what was the seed of the bad day? And then how did you manage that bad day? If that happens again in your journal, might not be a bad day, might be a business problem. And that's how you do it. And that's how you iterate and move into a much more, you start regenerating.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, no, it's so funny because, just hearing you talk through all this stuff, right? I mean, these are all, like this type of discussion is something we've had, a bunch of times with people on the show. And, I think every time I hear it, it sort of gives me hope every time I start thinking I'm doing something stupid, right? And so like lately, this year in particular has been kind of a wild one. Like, I mean, our business has just not come back yet. Like, here we are 4 months in and like, we've not recovered. And, we did great through COVID. We had no problems through all that stuff. And typically by February, we're back and swinging, but here it is April and we're not. Right. And so I've been putting a lot of thought into this kind of thing, right? Like, what is it that's missing, or what's broken, or how come we're not getting, the kind of leads we used to get, or whatever, right? There's all these things. And so I was just talking to my wife earlier about this very problem, this idea that, I'm stuck, but I don't know what the solution is and I don't know how to fix it. And so it's, I guess, starting to recognize that maybe there's a business problem at play, right? And right now I'm actually in the process of a pivot that is something I wouldn't have ever thought to do, but it came to me through a discussion with somebody. And so we're going to give it a shot. It's sort of tangentially related. We'll see if it works, but, but nonetheless, it's a pivot to try and, I guess, audible because things aren't going as usual.
Right, right. So one of the things, what I'm seeing happen here is that, the idea that you had, like, it was on a certain trajectory. And if you think of, you think of a ship, it's on a certain trajectory. And then you realize that there's a shoal in front of you. I mean, there's an iceberg, there's something. You have got to shift out of the way or you're going to crash. And so the pandemic really created this for a lot of businesses. And it was kind of blindsiding, because I don't know about you, but I never really imagined a pandemic in my thought of business building. So we've been kind of pinch hitting for 2 years. And so now I really think that what doesn't work anymore, that sort of the entrepreneurial world talked about a lot, is take my blueprint and do this, take my formula and do this, apply this template and do this. That doesn't work anymore. That's gone. That's over. That's dead. Now what we're realizing is, instead, what we need to do is learn how to chart a course. We need to learn how to chart a course based on reading the environment that we're actually in. And what's happening, I believe, now for entrepreneurs is that entrepreneurs are going to need to become master navigators, which is very different than applying a blueprint or applying a template that you bought or that a coach gave you or something. So what I tell people when I'm coaching is, I am not an answer expert. I am a process expert, though. And so what we'll do is we'll see if we can pull apart the pieces of your business that are really, really great. They're process driven. They're really awesome. We want to keep them, but then we want to look at the environment and say, yeah, I'm still really good at this, but I'm not going this way. I'm going that way. And for us, it's been really interesting. And I think for a lot of people, because trying to hire anybody right now is nearly impossible. So we've had to totally shift not only how we recruit, how we actually do the hire, how we onboard, and then how we train. That all of that in this past 3 years or 2.5 years has had to shift and be rewritten. But I'm still hiring people, right? So I think when you look at it, when you start to do this pivot that you're doing, allow yourself not to have it be like a right or wrong, but think of your pivot as the navigation. Think of the direction as charting your course. And how is that starting to unfold? And the beautiful thing is, that means that as you're doing it, you may be able to shift the charting a little bit, and you do it in a much more nimble way as you're making your pivot.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And I think it's a really good point. I really like all this talk about pivoting, right? You were talking earlier about how entrepreneurs can be really hard on themselves sometimes. And I think there's this expectation when you're the guy that started the business, or you're the guy that, came with the idea, that you are somehow omniscient, right? You're the one who knows how this is supposed to work. Like, you've created this thing, it's your thing, like you should know. And so I think that's where some of the shame comes from, right? When things don't go to plan, or, maybe your product fails altogether, or, whatever, there's this shame. And I think the real entrepreneurs, they just, throw it away and get on to the next one, right? They never really stop. But for your average entrepreneur, I think that's, can be a real brick in the road for a lot of people, where all of a sudden they just stop and they go, okay, well, I guess, I'm a failure and I don't know what I'm doing. So I guess I'm done. And so I think this idea, or this discussion about pivot or being regenerative and sort of looking at things in an iterative way, instead of this expectation that you should nail it the first time, I think is good.
And if we go back to nature, sorry, I always go back to nature. But one of the things that we know is that in the cold, dark places, that's where we lose often the ability for there to be real critical regeneration. So we need oxygen, we need water, we need life, we need all of these ingredients for regenerative action to happen. And one of the things that entrepreneurs do a lot is that they isolate. They self-isolate, because the shame will say, oh, I don't want to tell you that my business isn't recovering from COVID right now. I want you to, just all you got to do is go on socials, right? Everybody's doing great. And so instead, if we can move out of isolation and into collaboration, whether it's working with an association, though I have to say I've worked with a lot of associations in my industry, and I feel that we don't always bring our full selves to those because we're posturing a little bit.
Yeah, a little performative, right?
A little performative, good way to put it. So I really believe wholeheartedly in having a business coach for yourself, being involved in a mastermind where you're paying and other people are paying to be in that mastermind. So like right now I've got 2 coaches and I'm in a mastermind, and I do this because, and I'm, being on podcasts because I love meeting other people in business and seeing where their struggles are and where their successes are. But I know that like my 2 coaches are very, very different. And my mastermind is not even in my industry. Actually, none of them are in my industry. And I'm able to get this fresh set of eyes that I'm seen. And when you're seen and you're accepted and embraced, we have way more psychological capacity to be forgiving to ourselves and to be brave. Courage comes from being visible, being open, being out there. It doesn't come from cowering in a corner. And even though I don't think most entrepreneurs would say about themselves that they're cowering in a corner, but there is something psychologically that's doing that. So I try very hard, like in my regenerative business community, I'm really trying to get owners to fess up. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it and let's workshop it.
Yeah. So I love that you keep going back to nature and to regenerative and all that fun stuff. And I got to ask you, do you know what Earthships are?
Earthships?
Yep, Earthships.
I don't. You stumped me.
Okay. You gotta go down this rabbit hole. Essentially, it's sustainable building practices that you reclaim your water. It goes through like an 8-step process where you have your initial drinking water, your dirty water, and then you use it to flush your toilet, use it to all of your plants that you plant in the area are specific and purpose driven. And essentially you're creating a home or an environment that is sustainable, that is actually giving back versus taking. And I love that it's almost like you're creating symbiote, like, I don't know how to say it right, but like your thought process of business is like that same kind of cycle, that same kind of natural progression, the same kind of, I don't know. It just seems like they're one and the same, like as long as you're, I don't know how to define
I think what
it.
you were going to say the word symbiosis, like that symbiotic relationship. And I do think that there is something in it. You could also say it's just interconnectedness. No, you couldn't, because I couldn't get it out of my mouth. Interconnectedness. But I think that when we think of ourselves as full humans, then we have to consider nature. And then we also consider, okay, we go to work, we've got the work thing. Oh, we've got families, we've got children, we've got pets, we've got extended family, we've got community. That all of that interconnection really is where that triple bottom line thinking comes from. When you've got the planet, I have a diagram where I have like a big circle, it's the planet. And then inside that circle is nested the people. And inside that circle is nested the profits. And profits could be, it could be financial profits, but it can also be, the payback, the input, the net zero. It could be, whatever it is, but it's that outcome. It's that result that we all think we want. But if we don't have the people aspect and we don't have the nature aspect, the profits part can get corrupt really quickly. And I don't mean corrupt like we're going to put you in jail corrupt, though that could be that too. But I mean corrupt like we begin to feel bankrupt. We actually start to feel so drained that even though the business that we want to do is awesome, we are doing it at the expense of ourselves, or at the expense of our family, or at the expense of our employees, or at the expense of our planet. And I'm not perfect. I struggle with this. And part of the reason why I struggle with it is A, because I'm human, but B, because it's so important to me. So when I see that I'm not doing it right, or when I see that like I'm pulling on a pain thread, Ryan, like I'm like, ow, ow, ow. Why does this keep happening to me? Oh, I got to think different, because I keep steering myself into the same freaking iceberg. Right. So it is symbiotic with nature, but it's symbiotic with all other life forms.
Yeah. Well, and just to sort of build on what Mike's comment, I just wanted to say that, I mean, I think maybe it's something I've noticed the older I get, but like, it feels like the rules of the universe aren't that diverse. Like there's only sort of so many things, right? And it seems like whether you're talking about business or managing a family or, taking care of yourself, even, just physically, your own health or whatever, like it's kind of all the same. Like the way, it's the same 3 or 4 steps. It's the same, all this stuff. And so it's just being applied in different ways. And so taking it back to nature, I mean, it seems like sort of that's the root of all of this, right? And so we try and pretend that, business is this unique and amazing thing or whatever, but really no, there's just sort of these fundamental things and you just kind of keep redoing them, Yeah. And so, but everything can be broken down to these little steps. So, I mean, I'm with Mike that the analogy of sort of going back to nature or going back to your roots on all this stuff, even though, for cynical people or whatever, it gets a little woo woo sounding or something, I think generally we can all sort of understand that, we feel better when we're in the forest than we do when, in a filthy, like I was just in Times Square over the weekend and I couldn't believe the garbage that was stacked up everywhere. Right. So it's like, this is supposed to be beautiful Times Square and what a dump. And so, and meanwhile,
but you still had fun while you were there, right? Like,
it was
so
cool,
it's like,
but but the
you wouldn't
feeling,
want to live there.
Right. But the feeling's different, right? The feeling that you get when you're up in the woods or when you're, isolated on a mountainside somewhere is different than what you get in sort of an urban landscape. And I'm a guy that's inspired by cities, right? Like I love being in big cities. I love all that stuff. Like, I mean, that's huge for me. But, but just like I guess, again, that woo woo sort of energy that you feel inside yourself it's different, right? You get this kind of manic energy out of a city, which is exciting. And it brings you, this different kind of stuff, but then the tranquility or the peace or the quiet or whatever you can get and the time with your own thoughts that you get in nature, I think is the thing that, allows you to handle the manic energy when when you're looking for it, right? Like right. It's sort of all, you've got to have kind of the yin and the yang or the symbiosis, like you're talking.
Which is why parks in the city are so important.
Yes.
Right. Got to have parks in the city, right? Little respites. But yeah, absolutely. It's, we can always come back to that. And it doesn't make any of the other stuff bad or wrong. It just means we still always come back to nature.
Yep. I like that. You touched on something though, as you were giving us that description there, you talked about this idea of the triple bottom line.
Yes.
And I don't know if everybody knows that. Do you mind digging in a little bit on what the triple bottom line is? Like we described what it is, like, but could you, like, if you were to put up an infographic, like, can you explain to us what the triple bottom line is?
Yes. So the triple bottom line means that in order, sort of in compassionate capitalism, you really are looking to have your impacts be positive and have, or there's, in some aspects a net zero, like you're just trying not to create negative spin at all. And so triple bottom line really suggests that there is a way to build profitable business while also being tending and cultivating and nurturing to the planet and also human beings. And the reason why triple bottom line is so awesome is because we actually can't have profits without people in our economy. And we can't have people in an economy without a planet. So if we weave it all together right at the get-go, we actually have the ability to have a fundamentally strong and well-anchored business that you don't have to then just say, oh, take 10% and just give it all to charity, or have a picnic for your people every 3 years and then feel good about yourself. Instead, everything you're doing is always spinning that triple bottom line wheel. And an example of that is like in my business, we're very fossil fuel heavy. So, I have diesel trucks and diesel equipment and gas equipment, and there's just so much in order to make this work. And landscape companies often tend to get very, very spread out because they are not generally very good at marketing. And so they go where the work is. They don't cultivate the work where they want it. So what I decided was that I wanted to reduce my carbon footprint. And I'm not a mechanic. My brother is, but I'm not a mechanic. And I wouldn't know the first thing about a lot of mechanical kinds of things. But what I do know is that if I drive less, I emit less fossil fuels. But the only way to drive less is to have more work close to home. So, and at this point, I was driving an hour plus sometimes to jobs. And so for me, triple bottom line translated into, let's figure out how to become a company with a smaller carbon footprint that did really, really great work and gave amazing client care. And so I created a hyper-local model. I created a bullseye on the map with my company in the middle. And then I created, kind of these circles, these geographical circles. And I decided that I wanted to have 50% of all of my work in one town. And then we touch about 8 towns. I would have the next 20 to 25%, the next 40 to 45% in the next circle. And then I would only leave the geographical area for a reason. And that reason would have to be that it was a client connection. It was an amazing opportunity for growth or for publicity or just like a really cool experience. But otherwise, we stayed in. I was able to drop my fuel consumption by 60%. I was able to make up all of the income that I dropped in those outside territories. And now I'm known in my town as, the landscaper. So triple bottom line is really, it's like sort of this overarching idea. And then that idea can fuel, no pun intended, your profits by helping you to pivot your business in order to change your behavior. And the behavior that I needed to change was marketing.
I like that. It's amazing how you wouldn't think that, okay, my fuel expenses are X and I'm going all over the place. But if I just niche down in just one area and hypermarket that area, you can eliminate 60% of your expenses. That's amazing. So,
yeah.
We are at that time and I really enjoyed the conversation. I learned a bunch and, it's an interesting outlook. And is there any way that our listeners can reach out to you? Is there a website or a way they can get in touch?
Yes, absolutely. So my happy place is Instagram. So Monique.Allen on Instagram. I do a thing once a week called Lifescape TV, where I just drop concepts about cultivating joy on your business journey. And so that's a great place to just see what I'm doing and what I'm up to. And you can always DM me there. And in the link in the bio is all the connection points to, I have 2 free blogs. Mike, you got to totally sign up for the landscaping one so you can get some information. Definitely. If anybody's interested in the book, I do have a store. So you can just go right under the shop button on my website, thegardencontinuum.com, and buy the book. And there's also some cool ebooks about business building. There's a free one, which is awesome on there, called the Landscape Business Owner's Survival Guide, and it's all about cash flow. So for starters, go to Instagram, Monique.Allen.
Perfect.
Cool. That'll be great. I also wanted to ask you quickly, on thegardencontinuum.com, you have an academy thing. Do you mind describing what you're doing in the academy?
Yes. So in Academy is where I house all of the shop items. So my book, my ebooks, we've got a Landscaper's Freedom Formula that I sell, which is a course that's book after book after book. We're actually just going to be launching our 4th book. There's also tons of videos. So that is the access portal for everything if you want to learn about gardening directly, or about learning how to have a landscape business. And then my coaching is in there. So if you're interested in coaching with me, you can pop on to Coaching and Speaking and just apply to talk to me. We'll have a free call.
Perfect. Yeah, that's amazing. Well, yeah, thank you so much, Monique. This phone call or this podcast has just been amazing. It's been, I think, really insightful. And I think, I was feeling, just in true, full transparency, like we usually are on the show. I mean, I was a little down today, just kind of bumming out about this whole business thing and all that stuff, and griping to my wife, who's tired of hearing it and everything else. And so this conversation's been a real upper, and I really appreciate it. I mean, it's really useful, I think, and for other entrepreneurs that are struggling or dealing with either post-COVID fallout, or just a business that's not catching fire, or just a bump in the road, whatever it is. I think it's really important. All this messaging about, you can do it, you can restart, you're supposed to fail, like all that stuff, I think is really good to hear. And I love to hear it myself. So
can I share one little thing that could be helpful to you, but also helpful to everybody?
Of course.
Nope, we're out of time. Sorry.
You're out of time. All right, we're out.
This highly digital world, we're actually out.
Countdown. There is a great book called The Gap and the Gain. Have you seen that book?
I don't know that one.
Came out in 2021. Dan Sullivan, who's, just a long standing business coach, been a business coach forever. He and Ben, I'm forgetting his last name, also wrote the book Who Not How.
Okay.
Those are two really, really good books. And what I love about The Gap and the Gain, and it's awesome for entrepreneurs. It's a very easy read. I know entrepreneurs are busy, but I would say that if you were going to buy one book in this quarter and read it, that would be the book to read, because what it will do is it'll help you to shift your mindset from gap thinking to gain thinking. And the difference is very simply, when we're in the gap, we're always measuring ourselves up against an ideal. And we can never have the ideal. It's not how humanity works. It's not how life works. But we can measure our gain from where we used to be. And then we go, wow, I'm pretty kick-ass. I'm good, And so I would just say that that's like an awesome thing that can just be really uplifting. And it's on Audible, which I love just because I love to listen to books. They have some conversations. They just sort of chat through it. So
very cool. Well, yeah, no, I appreciate that. I'm always looking out for stuff and or for new books to read. I know Mike is a big Audible guy too. He drives a lot, so he likes to listen to the.
Well, and then there's, I don't know. Do you still get out and do landscaping and some physical work and stuff? I love when I'm out there working. I just put on the headphones and I hit play on an Audible book or a podcast, and it's just kind of a nice retreat away from real life. And then you can learn while you're doing it, and then get back to it when you're done.
Absolutely. Well,
all
right, gentlemen, thank you.
Thanks again, Monique. It's been awesome. And thanks so much to everybody who tunes in this week and every week. And we'll see you guys next time.